Welcome to Man to Man. I'm Robert Lewis, and what you're about to watch is a 10-week journey into authentic manhood that features real-life manhood issues, biblical insights, and highly practical applications. Filmed in a hotel ballroom as a community outreach, this man-to-man journey speaks to any man, but has a special focus on reaching young adult men between the ages of 20 and 40. 2 months before this journey began, pairs of older men were asked to invite 6 to 8 young men to join them for these sessions, with the goal being to help these young men better understand themselves and their manhood in a challenging and oftentimes confusing world. Each 90-minute man-to-man session consisted of a teaching time followed by a 30-minute small group discussion and interaction time over a light breakfast. We hope in viewing this series you will find it as helpful as the almost 600 men who joined us did. These videos also include links to download the handouts and PowerPoint for each session. They are yours without charge to encourage you to conduct your own man-to-man journey with a group of men, small or large, anywhere, anytime. And if you have a question, please contact us at adventures.life. So take a look and enjoy the journey.
Welcome, Robert Lewis.
Wow, what a great group we've got here today. Welcome, men, and welcome to our man-to-man series. It is really impressive. I got to tell you, I'm just really impressed that so many of you guys got out this early in the morning after going through an overtime last night. I kept telling myself, I got to go to bed, but the old athlete in me said, no, I've got to finish this thing and see who wins. Boy, what a game. Great game, wasn't it? We're delighted you guys are here. You know, Russell and I we probably couldn't be more excited about this morning because over a year ago, we were planning and talking about this right as we finished our last edition of Man to Man at the Crowne Plaza Hotel. We had a great turnout then. It was a terrific time. In fact, some of you who were at that one are here this morning. Again, you're back, maybe leading a table for this one. But I want to tell you, table leaders, while you're here, we're going to even do better in the next 10 weeks than we did over at the Crowne Plaza. Russell and I decided that mid-January was a great time to start this because we're past the holidays, the frenzy of the holidays. College football is now officially over. Nick Saban was awesome last night putting that freshman in for the second half, wasn't he? I mean, what a genius move and what a great game. The Super Bowl is still 3 weeks away. And by the way, you know what you call 45 guys eating pizza and watching the Super Bowl? The Dallas Cowboys. Ooh, that hurts, doesn't it? That hurts. Hey, now before we go any further, I want to thank the table leaders that are around the tables all throughout the audience. In fact, you table leaders, why don't you just raise your hand for a second? Guys, look around. You see these table leaders? I really appreciate these guys. These guys have already met with us and talked with us about helping lead the discussions. They'll be the ones leading the discussions after the end of each session because at the bottom of your outline are a few discussion questions. And when we're done and they bring in breakfast, you're going to talk about those things. Those table leaders are going to lead you through those questions and help you process the information we talk about. They've also committed to be available to you outside even man-to-man. There may be some things that come up along the way that you just want to talk with another guy about. And these guys have been through a lot of this material. They're more veterans. They put in the time to want to be here for you. So we want you to take advantage of them. But what I want to do right now is just tell the table leaders, thank you guys, really. We appreciate your help in helping us pull off this event. Before I go any further, I just want to tell you I have a prayer for every guy in the room. And my prayer is this, that over the 10 weeks that we spend talking and interacting together, that somewhere along these 10 weeks, we're going to say things, you're going to have discussions, I'm going to mention something that's going to spark an idea or an action step in your heart that you say to yourself, I need that, or I need to do that, or I need to pursue that. That may be something as much as a new move that you heard in here for your marriage, or something to do with your kids, or maybe it involves your workplace. Maybe it's something that we bring up that has been kind of an anchor that you've been carrying from your past, that as we've talked about it, you start feeling the courage to deal with it. There may be all kinds of things that come up along the way, but I'm hoping that before our time is up, there are 2 or 3 of those kind of heart-grabbing moments that occur here that you can use for your life, so that when all this is over and you're looking back maybe 6 months from now, you can say this is my prayer, that I'm glad I went to that, because I became a better man. That's what all this is about, is to help you guys just become in some way, some small way, not a perfect way, because there are none of us that are perfect. We all carry a lot of flaws. We all have clay feet. But if you can just become a little bit better, it makes a huge impact on everybody. So welcome. And let's get started. You might take your outlines. And a good place to begin is by surveying our culture today and just asking a simple question. How are men doing? In fact, maybe we could ask this question. How are we doing? And I have 3 general observations that I'd like to make here at the beginning that I found to be true. And the first is some good news. And here's what it is. Some men have found a manhood that really works for them. Some men have found a manhood that works. Now, how they found that and exactly what it is, that's what we'll talk about in the weeks to come. But they found a manhood that works. And when I mention that, I'm not talking about a manhood in terms of financial success or personal achievement or fame or power or things like that guys can be baited with as they grow up and move out into life and think that's where real life is going to be, and then in the end it leads maybe to some regrets. There's nothing wrong with any of those things, but that's not where real manhood lies. If I could reduce real manhood down to one thing, this is the word I would use. That real man has been and still is life-giving. That's what real manhood is all about. It's life-giving. That's the manhood, by the way, that's described of the greatest man who ever lived. That's Jesus Christ. In fact, in 1 Corinthians 15:45, this is what it says about Jesus. It says, Jesus the man was a life-giving spirit. Boy, that's a great phrase. In other words, you boil the life of Jesus down to a bottom line. What was the essence of Jesus himself? The essence of Jesus was that he was life-giving. And wherever you see life-giving manhood appear, either in your life or around you, here's what you see. You see that people are encouraged by it. You see that families thrive in it. You see women and wives who feel safe and valued by it. Sons are drawn to it. Daughters delight in it. Your workplace and the community are better for it. That's what life-giving manhood is all about. And the truth is, today, sprinkled throughout this room, kind of like salt out of a salt shaker, throughout this room, there are life-giving men here. And you're to be congratulated in that. Because that's a life that works. And that's a manhood that's life-giving. And what we want to do is to bring as much of that to light over these next 10 weeks as we can, so that you can look at it, test it, talk about it, process it. And for a number of you, especially in spots where all of us maybe have some weak points, you can embrace it and become a better man. This is my second observation. But that's the good news, by the way. The good news is some men have found a manhood that works. Here's the second observation for you guys. Some men, and this is not so good news, some men live in a manhood fog. Manhood fog. You know, a generation ago, kind of in my day, for better or for worse, if you were a young man growing up, when I was a young guy growing up, manhood was not foggy. Manhood was clear. You just, the whole society had some common values, some common measurements for what a man was to be, what you were striving for. First and foremost was to be married. That was a clear marker, a manhood marker that you had achieved this kind of new season of your life from childhood to manhood. You were to be the head of your home. You were to be the responsible leader of your family. You were to be the breadwinner financially. And you were to be the guardian of your home and of your kids. Those were the manhood markers, and every guy in the 50s thought that way. Culture thought that way. It pushed men in that direction. But now here in the 21st century, those cultural markers have kind of faded. They've grown dull. Many of them have been abandoned. These roles of manhood have disappeared. Some of them are not even politically correct, so we can't talk about them. And on top of that, a number of the things that used to be a man's responsibility are now to be equally shared with a woman. So when you say, what does it mean to be a man today? For you millennial guys out there, what does it mean to be a man today? There's kind of a haze over that kind of term. And it's hard to get your hands on it. Married? Is that what it means to be a man? Hey, we live in the 21st century. I might want to opt for an equal opportunity like cohabitation. That's not a problem today. That's what I can enjoy. To be the head of my home, we don't even talk that way anymore, guys. In fact, you get that, you're going to get some blowback. Says who? So you better whisper that. Breadwinner? Did you know today 66% of all our homes today, women are either the primary breadwinner of the home or they're the co-breadwinner? And 66% of American homes. To be the guardian of your family? You know, not really anymore. Not really. In fact, a woman can take care of herself today and her kids. Men now, a husband in a lot of homes in America are just simply optional for them. The New York Times said it this way: single moms are the new normal in the 21st century. They earn the money, they take care of themselves, and what they don't need is to bring a guy into the home that's going to screw all that up. So they just kind of outsource him from time to time. He moves in, he moves out. That's the new normal. So what does it mean to be a man? It's a good question, isn't it? What makes you, sitting out there today, unique as a man, different from a woman? Is it because you have a penis? Or a little more muscle mass? Is that what makes you a man? See, today in our culture, for guys, the silence can be deafening. And in that quiet, where you can't feel your way through that, it also gets to be confusing. Which leads me to my third observation. Foggy, confused men struggle. They do. And they struggle the most in two ways. First, they settle for less in life because they don't know it's less. Because they have nothing to measure what they're doing against. You see, without clear manhood guidelines to help us men, and I want to say this, to kind of vet our choices. We have some grid to vet our choices, our priorities, our values. It becomes easy for us to miss the best because the truth is, we're guessing. We're just guessing. We need to figure it out on our own. So we guess our way through life, and as we do that, whether we know it or not, we often guess wrong, and then that leads to living lives that in time prove to be imbalanced. Or we shortchange our families because we give too much of ourselves to a career. Or we miss the transcendence of this life that's sitting out there. because we're chasing after more stuff that's going to pass away. Many times over the years where I've had the privilege, and I've had the privilege now many years of talking to men, teaching men, not just here, but all over the world. Invariably, after some of the time where we spend together talking through this material, I'll have a group of guys who will come down and see me before the day ends, usually middle-aged guys. They'll be standing around and they'll want to talk. Invariably, they say the same thing to me over and over again, whether it's on this continent or it's in Asia or Africa, and here's what they'll say. I wish I'd have heard this 20 years ago. I wish I'd have heard these things to get some clarity because I've been confused. And then they'll basically tell me their story, and their story always kind of goes like this. I chased after the wrong things, or I chased after one thing way too much and ignored other vital things in my life. And now I have a lot of regrets. And then they'll look at me and say something like this. Because I settled for less. That's what confused men do, and they don't even know it. Here's the second observation. Foggy, confused men create problems. Sometimes lots of problems. And I don't need to offer you guys much for you to know that. You can look at your iPhone today, pull up USA Today, and just read the headlines of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. And you have evidence of that everywhere. Today, listen, most social problems, and I'm going to use America, in America, most social problems of every kind rest at the feet of confused men. For whatever reason, as tough as we look, and there is a toughness to masculinity, but for whatever reason, along with that toughness is an opposite. There's a fragility. There's an instability. There's a confusion if you don't have focus and purpose to stabilize you. So if you watch TV and read the news, you see that being played out all the time. 90% of all crime in America today is male crime. Our prisons are male, basically. 98% of all rapes done by men. 94% of all drunken drivers are men. Most marriage problems are man problems. I can say that because I've been a counselor for almost 50 years now. And I'll have guys and gals in my office and we talk through things, but after a while you don't have to be an expert to walk through these issues with marriages. All of a sudden you'd start seeing a pattern develop. And it's a male pattern. That's where the problems mostly lie. Did you know 23% of all college females, before they finish college, 1 in 4 of those young women will be sexually assaulted in one way or another? That's the world we live in. The point is this. When men get lost, we get confused. And when men get confused, we start creating problems. Lots of them. And that's not just here in Little Rock or in America. That's everywhere, in every age, in every place, and on every continent. It's our pattern if we don't know where we're going in life. I remember one time doing some research and came across a great quote by the world-famous anthropologist Margaret Mead. She's passed away now, but she was considered kind of at the top of her game. And she had surveyed cultures around the world. That was her job, written numerous articles and books. And she made this primary observation. She said this: the chief responsibility of every society, that got my attention, the chief responsibility of every society is to find appropriate roles for its men. Now, why did she say that? Because as she observed cultures, she saw over and over again that cultures fail when they fail to offer a focus point, a blueprint, a definition of masculinity that's clear, that the society as a whole reinforces, to take all that male energy and move it in a positive, noble direction. And if it doesn't do that, if it doesn't provide that, then the cloud that settles in over that culture becomes foggy, and foggy men make big mistakes. They dumb down to less. That's us. So when you look at the American culture today, you see two things, basically, just generally. You see some men have found a manhood that works, and we want to talk about that. While others live in a manhood fog, guessing at life and hoping that what they guess at works. That's where men are today, both good and both bad. Now, what are the challenges for guys going forward? The challenges of our age. I want to mention 4 really big challenges for you just to consider here today, because basically today is just an orientation. We're launching ourselves into this manhood journey. But here are 4 big challenges. The first one is this. The loss of a common cultural manhood vision is a big challenge for us as men. We've already mentioned that, but I want to reinforce that for just a moment. One researcher put it this way. He said, today, especially young men are not sure who to be anymore. As I said, society doesn't offer this manhood outline, but here's the real problem. Nor will it anytime soon. So finding spaces like this for guys to talk about what it means to be a man, let me tell you, if nothing else, this is very rare. Very rare. Our society doesn't think this way. It doesn't promote this. We're just free radicals out there, floating in space. So what do? Living in this no man's land. That's what America is today. It's a no man's land. Do we just individually make up a manhood for ourselves? That's one big option. A lot of guys will do that. I call it manhood for the moment. What you see on TV, what you experience through music, the movies, around you in the workplace, you kind of formulate this kind of your own personal customized definition of manhood. That's one option you have, manhood for the moment. But there's another option that I'm going to present to you as we go along. Do we dare believe that out there is some universal vision of manhood that's timeless? That's been out there since the beginning of time, one that applies to every man that maybe we've forgotten in our modern sophistication and frenzied lifestyle. Is there such a manhood out there? Because in the end, every guy in the room has one of 2 choices. You can either opt for manhood of the moment, or you might be able to find a timeless manhood that if we really understand it, kind of like the Holy Grail, it gives life. It's life-giving and has been life-giving since the beginning of time. But that's our challenge. What is that definition? Here's a second challenge, what I call the rise of dark manhood. The rise of dark manhood. You've probably heard of dark matter. Astrophysicists talk about dark matter. They can't see it, but now they've come to the conclusion dark matter fills our universe. And the reason they know it's there because they can see its effects even though they can't see it with a telescope. Dark manhood is just like that. You can't really see it, but boy, you can feel its effects. And dark manhood is created primarily by a missing dad. Research tells us that a good dad or a healthy dad surrogate gives a boy 2 powerful things in his life when he's growing up. And you might just reflect about your growing up, even as I talk about this. But here are the 2 things a dad gives a son. One, he gives a son his personal presence, just being up close with him, interacting with him. And as he does that, what his son starts to feel is this emotional connection with his dad. He feels affirmed, he feels approved, he feels loved. Those just basic things that any child needs. A dad next to his son gives him his presence, and because of that, that becomes a huge emotional stabilizer that he takes out with him into adulthood. Second thing a good dad does is he gives his son his instruction. He talks about life with him. And as he does that, his son develops convictions of what are right and wrong. What are the rights and wrongs? He picks that up from his dad. He learns to have convictions of things he needs to live for, and he picks up some basic skills from dad of how to live those things out before he's launched out into adulthood. When a son leaves home as an adult, with those two things, Dad's presence and Dad's instruction, he goes out into life enlightened. That's how he goes out into life, not dark. He feels, at least at a core level for his life, established or rooted. I like what the Scripture says in Proverbs 17:6. It says this. It says, the glory of sons is their fathers. Now that's an interesting phrase because the word glory comes from a root word in Hebrew to describe weight. And so you could say it this way: the weight of sons is their fathers. Have you ever seen those plastic air dummies that kids have that are weighted at the bottom? And you can come up and you can hit them and you can kick them and they go down and hit the ground, but then they pop up because they're weighted. That's a great description of how a young man with an enlightened dad who spent time with him can go out into life. He can take the hits because he's stabilized. He's weighted. And no matter how hard you hit him, he can take on life because after that, he's going to hit the ground, but then he's going to pop up and keep going. That's what dads do for their boys. But on the other hand, if he misses what I call those primal enlightenments, either dad's instruction or dad's presence, what comes into that void is dark manhood. And it starts filling his life. And he becomes just the opposite of that air dummy that pops back up. He becomes weightless. And so when you kick him or when life is hard on him, he gets kicked and he just floats away. He has nothing to stabilize him. And that dark manhood brings with it into his life feelings of insecurity, or rage, or shame, or feelings of incompetence. There's nothing worse than a boy going out into life and feeling incompetent. Remember when I was in junior high and the coach was talking, we were first day of practice, I was in the 7th grade, and he was telling the guys about equipment they needed to get, and he mentioned you need to get a jock strap. And I was one of the few kids whose dad had not instructed him on that. So I raised my hand and said, Coach, what's a jock strap? And I was shamed for the rest of the season. And I felt so angry because I was incompetent in that moment. Well, you multiply that in all kinds of ways for men going out into life where they don't have that backup of dad's instruction. And so life hits them hard and carries them away. And they feel rage and shame and depression and incompetence. And as that goes out into adulthood, those feelings that you've been festering with then start erupting on the surface of your life as a grown man. So what you see is you see guys get angry and start acting out that angry because of what's missing in their life. Drugs and alcohol and pornography guys use to numb out because of that dark manhood. There are some guys who go out and they just simply give up. They just drop out. They withdraw because they know they can't win. You know what you call that? You call that dark manhood. And then you see other guys go the opposite direction. They become workaholics. They become high achievers to show out, not just act out. In fact, some of the great achievers in American culture, if you read their biographies, you know what you're going to find in the pages of their biography? A dad who wasn't there. And what they turned that into was workaholism, because what the workaholism was about was them trying to prove at a primal level, I am somebody. Look at this. I remember having breakfast with a 70-year-old neurosurgeon. He had just finished his career, highly acclaimed, had started businesses on the side that were very successful. And he told me over breakfast, he said, I finally figured out why I worked 80-hour weeks. I was trying to tell my dad, look at me. I am somebody. And my dad never saw me. That's called dark manhood. Now, two things you need to know about dark manhood. Two things I think are really important. First of all, women can't fix dark manhood. Moms try to fix it in their sons, especially when their sons start going wayward in the teenage years or the early years of their 20s. Wives try to fix dark manhood. I just want to tell everybody up front, one of the reasons we're here, because if we all got a little dark manhood, we can fix it, but here's how you fix dark manhood: with the companionship and interaction with other men and with the living God. Those two things are things that can correct dark manhood. Second thing I want you to know is dark manhood is on the rise in America today because fatherlessness is on the rise. In 1960, only 5% of boys in America grew up in homes that were fatherless. Today in America, 41% of all young men grow up in fatherless homes. And that number is actually continuing to rise even with all that we know that brings when they grow up without a dad. And when you do that, it unleashes in one form or another all kinds of problematic behavior. Some dark manhood is in the room today. We can't see it, but if we were around each other long enough, we'd start to feel it. I know I grew up and expressed a lot of dark manhood in my own life. I'll share some of that in the weeks to come. Some of us have just a little bit of it, and some of us, quite frankly, have a lot of it. But my point for now is just simply this. The challenge for all men going forward in the 21st century is not to ignore that kind of stuff. That is a huge wrong turn. The thing we all need to do is enlighten ourselves about what all that means. And then for those of us who have pieces of it or a lot of it, you can't move forward to a new life-giving manhood until you address in some way the dark manhood that's infecting your life. And we'll talk about that. Here's a third challenge men face: a radically changed social landscape. You know, by all accounts, the last 50 plus years have been really culturally breathtaking. We're moving as cultures at warp speed today. It's a time of what I call high octane change. That's the world you live in. And for you young guys, it just feels normal. For some of us who've lived a little longer, sometimes it's dizzying to see all the changes that can take place in a short period of time. But here are just some of the changes that have taken place in the last 30 or 40 years. Men and women's roles have merged together. The definition of marriage has changed for the first time in 8,000 years. Whoa, that's significant. Cohabitation has exploded on the American landscape, so much so that for the first time in American history, there are more single men than married men. That's never happened before. There are now 4 or 5 genders, not 2. Sexual standards have been lowered, real low. So low, in fact, that, no longer is the break point of sexual intimacy, just sexual intimacy, much less sexual intercourse, the break point of that or the entry point of that being marriage, but now it's just the girl you're hanging out with this weekend. You don't even think about it. And the thing is, all your friends, because of how they've grown up, it doesn't bother them. That's just new manhood of the 21st century. But does that have implications? And what are they? That's the question. Education has been turned upside down. In 1960, 66% of all college students were men. Today, 60+% of all college students are women. More women today will get master's degrees than men. More women will get PhDs this year than men. I remember walking into Starbucks one day and there was the New York Times sitting there, and this was the front page news of the New York Times. I still remember the title. When it comes to education, women are leaving men in the dust. We're stalled. We're stuck. We're not progressing, but women are progressing at warp speed. And because of that, 40% of all businesses this year will be run by women. Most mid-management positions in the workplace today are positions held by women. More and more wives out-earn their husbands. A lot of you guys sit in the room and go, boy, that's true. And that changes the whole dynamic of the home. Now, am I saying that women shouldn't work? Don't go out and say that. I've got 2 daughters, and I want them to be everything they're meant to be. I just want you to know it has an impact on us. And how do we adjust all that? Because what we see today is in the 21st century economy, women are excelling and men are stalled. That's where we are. It's a brave new world out there, and the challenge is, now, we're not going to change a lot of it. The question is, how am I going to deal with it? And how am I going to live in it? That's the question, which then leads us to a 4th challenge. And this is a much more personal challenge. It's the lies men fall into. The lies that men fall into. Guys, generally speaking, life is best processed. I think this is one of the reasons I love that we're around tables with table leaders to have discussions after each session. But generally speaking, life is best processed out in the open with other people, where you can hear what they think about your life and what you're feeling and what you're experiencing and that kind of thing. Where there can be some assumptions that are made that may be incorrect, that maybe a friend can help you readdress in a better way. You can debate your life out in the open. I think we would all agree that women just naturally are much better at that than we as men. They're less guarded, they're more transparent and vulnerable, they're more willing to get a group of women together and seek help. Isn't that true? Not with us men, though. We men like to play the cards of our heart close. We don't like to display them as much out in the open. Our first move, just naturally for men, is towards the secret self, not the public self. If we've got things going on, we're not really doing well in our home, with our marriage, with our wife, or at our job, we just kind of withdraw into a private space and deliberate and talk with ourselves. And that's the problem. That's the problem. Because there's no one there to challenge us. There's no one there to give what we desperately need, some greater objectivity. Some of you guys are really private. You live your life talking to yourself between your ears all the time, rather than talking to somebody about it. And because of that, if you talk to yourself enough with no pushback, you may not realize this, but you're moving into an assumption about life that's really a lie. And that lie can undercut your manhood and have a big impact on you. So what are some of those private lies we fall into with the secret self? Let me just mention 4 of them real briefly. First is this. We think to ourselves, I should know what to do. Let me tell you guys, that's a lie. You shouldn't know what to do. You see, when you move out into life and you move, let's say, into a marriage, especially the social things, most things that we move into, like job or career or sports, you have a coach and you have a playbook and you practice and then you perform. But many of the more delicate areas of life, like how to live with a woman, how to talk to your son and connect at a heart level, how to create a relationship with God, those kind of things, those are kind of things that men don't play publicly a lot. They just withdraw. And the reason they withdraw is because here's what they're telling themselves. I should know what to do. That is such a lie. Who told you you should know how to be married? Who told you you should know how to have intimacy with a woman? I grew up in a small North Louisiana town. My folks had a very difficult marriage. A lot of times I felt like I was the referee as a kid. That's not a good place to be. But I saw a lot of dysfunction, not function. And then when I graduated from college, I got married. And I remember those first few years of marriage were tough. I made a lot of mistakes, foolish decisions, wrong interactions. But the whole time I was telling myself, I can figure this out. I had no coach, no playbook, and no practice. But I thought I was supposed to know what to do. That was such a foolish thing. It's the same way with raising your kids. Same way with maybe thinking what my life's all about, my purpose, or who God is. Without a coach, a playbook, and skills, you should not know what to do. And you should feel okay about that. Because if you can admit that to yourself, you'll seek help. You'll find a coach. You'll start working on some new skills so you can perform as a man. But don't live under the lie, I should know. Here's the second thing. I'm the only one who struggles with this. I had a guy come up and talk to me about an in-law, a mother-in-law, who was controlling he and his wife's life. And he felt so foolish that he couldn't get out from under that. And then he said to me this, I'm probably the only guy that struggles with that. And I thought, no, you're not. If you've got a problem, there are a lot of guys who've got that problem. Because when you think I'm the only one who struggles with that, you'll suffer in silence. You'll beat yourself up. You'll tell yourself you're stupid, that you're a loser. The reason you can't connect with your teenage son who's now pulling away from it, because I'm just a loser. I just don't know how to do it as a dad. That is such a lie. And it holds you back. Here's a third lie. It's too late for me to do anything about this. I hear that from a lot of middle-aged guys. They'll come up to me and say, I wish I had a good relationship with my son, but I didn't spend enough time at home. We struggled. He left. He didn't want anything to do with me. Man, I guess it's just too late. Guys, look at me. In those areas, it's never too late. There are proven pathways back. Guys who maybe have gone through a divorce and there's a lot of dysfunction and anger and bitterness that's spilled out of that. I remember talking to guys a lot about that, thinking, I'm just stuck. Can't do anything about it. That is such a lie. There are all kinds of ways you can do good things about that. Life is never over until it's over. That's what we learn in sports. That's what Nick Saban learned last night, right? In the fourth quarter. Here's a fourth kind of lie. I can do this and no one will ever know. How many guys have been swallowed up by that lie? I just keep telling myself, when are we ever going to learn? I mean, can you say the name Matt Lauer? Bobby Petrino? Tiger Woods? No one will ever know. And yet your career is turned upside down in your life and your family. Because someone will know. You can't just take that little extra drink, in the bedroom or on the trip and think, I can handle this, or the next little set of pills, or watching at night a little bit of pornography, think, my kids will never see this. See, guys live under that lie thinking no one's going to figure this out. And I go, do you think you're that smart? When you see paraded every day in our world that you're going to be found out eventually. That's just a lie of manhood. So guys, just want to tell you, those are some of the things that we struggle with. These are some of the challenges, the 4 challenges we just talked about. The challenge of a changing culture, changing families, the lies that we sometimes embrace within ourselves. All those things are challenging you and me every day. But here's the question. Can we define a manhood that will work for us in the 21st century world? That's the question. We might even say this. Is there a manhood out there that history affirms in every culture? A manhood you can feel confident measuring your life by? A manhood you would want to pass along to your sons rather than just shouting at him at a ball game, be a man! But you don't even know what that is? Wouldn't it be good if you could, in a less volatile moment, you could pull your son maybe on a retreat or whatever, say, son, I'm going to talk to you about what it means to be a man. And you could tell him what that was, specifically, in ways that would motivate him. A manhood that women and families, I found, long for, that our communities right now desperately need? A manhood, if I could reduce it to one word, that's life-giving. Is there a manhood like that out there? My answer to you, and this is the good news, is yes. And on the journey we're going to have together, we're going to discover what that means, not just generally, but with hands-on specifics. So let me finish, and I'm going to finish here in just the next couple of moments by giving you what I call 5 manhood promises for the next 9 weeks that we're going to spend together after today. First, I want to promise you, these are my promises. You can hold me accountable to this. But my first promise is that when we're finished, you're going to have a clear and practical definition of life-giving manhood. We're going to lay that out very specifically in week 5, and then in weeks 6 through 10, we'll spell it out with specifics with practical applications. Secondly, I promise you'll increase your manhood understanding by going through this journey with us. It's going to open some doors, ring some bells, turn on some lights for you. You'll make some manhood discoveries that really will be significant for you. So we want to increase your manhood understanding with these significant personal discoveries. As I found, probably the thing that'll feel best to you over the next 9 weeks is that you'll discover this, that you're not alone. That's such a good feeling. That others feel the way as you talk, you'll say, that guy feels just like me. I didn't know others felt that way. You'll find other guys struggle the way you struggle, have the same questions you do about life, have the same needs you have for something bigger than yourself. You're going to find other guys, all that stuff you kind of at times have been suppressing, other guys are feeling the same thing. And woo pig sooie, it feels so good to know you're not alone. It does. Third, you'll receive helpful insight and support from your table leaders. Talked about that at the beginning. But these are guys who are here for one reason. They think you're worth spending time with. They want to get up in the morning. Some of them have already heard this material, but they want to be here at the table to help you process this material. And guys, nobody's paying them for doing this. They're all good for nothing in here. Okay? But they're here for you. And they're here to help you process this. And many of them have already said to me, if there's anybody that wants to talk more about this, even outside the meetings, I'm here for them. I'd love to get a cup of coffee and talk about something specific that they want to talk about, just personally. So take advantage of these table leaders that you'll get to know even better in the 9 weeks we have to come. Fourth, I promise you'll make some new friends here. I mean, we don't come from the same church or the same company. We're a collage of guys from all over the city here today. And that's a good thing, because you're going to meet guys you've never met before. You're going to be around the table, and a guy's going to say something that's going to connect you, and maybe you get together for breakfast sometime during the 9 weeks, and you really like this guy. He's a lot more like you than maybe even some of your other friends, and that'll create a bond. We found this over and over again. Guys connect here, and for some, they actually build lifelong friendships. And I hope that'll happen for you. And then finally, you'll have the opportunity to upgrade your manhood. And you may say, well, how will we do this? Well, each week, like today, you're going to be walking through this handout that you have in front of you and then discussing it with the questions at the end. But starting next week, on your outline, there'll be an additional question. In fact, I'll read it to you. Here's what it'll say. What possible action step could I take from this session that could upgrade my manhood and make me a better man? Now, that's not a question for you to answer at the table. That's a question for you to take your outline home with you. And here's what I would there's no homework per se in this journey we're going to have together, but I would hope sometime between sessions, you would just take a moment and look at what you heard and what you talked about and think of what happened. What is one thing that I could do that might help me become a better man? And then just write it down and keep those notes. And then when we get to session 9, you'll come in here and on your table will be a little card. It's like a credit card. And on it, it'll say Better Man, and on the back of it, it'll just have numbers 1, 2, and 3. And you'll take that home with you on session 9. And what we would love for you to do is take that home, get your notes out, look at the 8 or so action points that you've put down as you've thought about your manhood, and then boil those 8 thoughts down to 3 things, just 3 things that you could personally do for you, that you could gift you with to make you a better man, and then unleash more life from you to your wife, your kids, your friends, your workplace, just to help you take some steps to be a better man for you. 3 things. Because here's what I want you to know. If you just get a little bit better, none of us are going to get perfect, but if you just got a little bit better, you unleash a whole lot of good on everybody. Because that's the secret of manhood. Manhood is incredibly powerful. When its forces are focused on doing good, men can do incredible things. That's where it gets exciting. So on week 10, you'll bring that card that you've put those 3 things down on back in here, and when we finish on session 10, that's going to be your discussion around the table. It's for you to share your little card. Okay? And then, when it's all over, put it in your wallet like a credit card. So when you bump into Samuel L. Jackson and he says, "What's in your wallet?" you can say to him, "It's my plan to be a better man." So guys, here's what I want you to know. In the 10 weeks we have together, this is not about coming in here and listening. I mean, I hope this will be a great experience of things you're hearing and learning, but it's not about listening. Here's what it's about. It's about upgrade. It's about stepping to the next step. It's about getting just a little bit better. You know, when I played college athletics, the difference between a linebacker who could run a 4.8 and a 4.5 was immense, but it was only 0.3 of a second. That's like manhood. Just a few little upgrades can be incredibly significant to your life and to the lives of others. Because we're not in here to listen. We're in here to get better. So there you have it. For starters this morning, a brief overview. Man, I'm so glad you're here. It just feels great having all you guys in the room. Just an overview of where men are today and 5 promises that I really believe I can make and deliver on in the next 9 weeks. So welcome to Man, and welcome to a manhood that works.